time as an option. You can't flip the schedule. Okay, so you're constrained the schedule. Okay, and you can deal with that. Now, the third workable assumption or expectation is there are fixed constraints in schedule and resource cost. So there's a date by which the testing work must be done. There's a limit to how much money is going to be spent. You have to be done within those constraints. So do as much as you can in terms of coverage within those constraints. So notice that in the second and third instances there, what we're going to be doing is some amount of reducing the test basis as we go through the estimation process to try to fit within the constraints. We're basically going to be cutting down on our coverage, either the depth of coverage or the breadth of coverage or both to try to fit that in. But workable. The last one, the breaking the iron triangle, this is basically where the expectation is this assumption that we can arbitrarily set the schedule, the budget, the number of features to be delivered, and the quality. That these things don't interact. So I want all of the features. I only want to spend this amount of money. I want them done on this date, and by the way, they have to be perfect. Right? And that's not a realistic assumption. That's not something that's possible. So if you run into that expectation, it's not really so much an estimation problem. It's more of an education problem that you have to explain to people, look, we can't achieve arbitrary quality targets if we're constrained in these other three areas. Okay, so let's assume that we can get the expectations set properly across ourselves and all the stakeholders. So we all have agreed to which of the three workable scenarios we're in, right? Unlimited schedule and budget, limited schedule but basically unlimited budget, or limited schedule and budget. And those are going to be one of those three things. Okay, so from there we can start putting together a work breakdown structure or a Gantt chart using a tool like, say, Microsoft Project or something like that. So in a work breakdown structure, you have major stages of a project, in this case it's the testing sub-project, and then activities within each of those stages, and then tasks within those activities, right? Now, in order to come up with this task list in the work breakdown structure, what I would typically want to do is a combination of what I call thinking forward and thinking backward. So the thinking forward is you've probably been through a number of projects before, so you know what happens. So if you're in a planning stage, then you can just think about, okay, well, first we do this, and then we do this, and then we do this, and then we do this, right? And what you're basically doing there is saying this project is going to be like previous projects, and so I'm going to come up with the tasks based on what we've done on previous projects. That's thinking forward. Thinking backward is to look at your risk analysis, and in your risk analysis you identify what you were going to test and how much, right? So you can say, all right, now I know what test suites I need, because it's, based on the critical risks I identified. So it's functional test suite, performance test suite, error handling test suite, reliability, security, right? And the greater the extent of testing, the more the effort in the execution period. So we're starting with test execution and saying, hey, this is what we need to do during test execution. And then we start working backward to say, let's say with performance, okay? Create a performance test suite. All right, so there's test development work that we need to do to develop a performance test suite. How long is that going to take? What's involved with that? Do we need a performance testing environment? So then there are test environment acquisition and configuration tasks that are associated with that. Maybe we're using a tool that nobody knows in the team. So do we have to hire somebody to bring in some knowledge, or have some training done to bring in some knowledge, something, what staffing tasks might apply to this? And then maybe we even want to have a separate performance test plan, so there might be some planning tasks that are associated with this. So that's what I mean by thinking backwards. You look at everything that was identified in your risk analysis and you ask yourself, what would I have to do throughout the entire project to make sure that when I get into test execution, I'll be ready to perform the level of risk mitigation that we said we were going to do. Okay? Now you want to break this down so that the tasks are relatively short in duration. A day, 2 days, 3 days, maybe 5 days, outer limit. The reason that you want this to be fine-grained is that if you're going to use it to track your project as you go forward, in other words, like on a every other day or twice a week basis, you're going to go through and check to see where you stand on your work breakdown structure. If the tasks are too big, then you can get way behind schedule before you realize that you're way behind schedule. So you want to use this fairly fine-grained breakdown. But you don't want to get smaller than a day, in my experience. When you start having these 4-hour and 2-hour tasks, it becomes unmanageable. So you want it to be like a day, 2-day kind of thing. And ideally, each task ultimately will have a single owner. That's another good rule of thumb, is that you have one person that owns the task. It's not something that's owned by multiple people. Okay, so let's look at a hypothetical case study here, so to put this in some context. So assume that you're the test manager working on a project to develop a video game. You have yourself on your team, 2 test engineers, and 5 test technicians. You are responsible for the system testing of the game prior to release. You're following primarily a V model or sequential kind of life cycle. I could have done this for Agile or pseudo-Agile, but I picked V model just because. Your test strategy is risk-based, scripted, manual test cases, primarily some amount of automated load and reliability testing mixed into that. So your initial work breakdown structure might look like this. So you see we have, here are the stages. You've got planning, test development, test environment, and test execution. We didn't have any staffing here because there wasn't any, we had an existing team that we were going to use. Okay. All right, so we've got the initial list of tasks, and now we're going to sit down with the testers. We're going to do the work and try to get from them a sense of the effort and duration associated with each task. And also, are we missing any tasks? So project management theory says there are 2 classic techniques for this. There's the Delphic Oracle, which is where you have each team member estimate each task. And then if everybody agrees on the effort and duration, fine, no problem, and that task is such. But in some cases, you'll have a high estimator and a low estimator, right? So you would have the person who estimated high explain why they think it will take that long or require that much resource, and similarly, the person who estimated low to explain. And maybe they convince each other, not. Now there's a stopping rule here that says you repeat the second step at most twice. So you allow them to do a point-counterpoint thing basically, and then you stop. And if they can't agree in that, that one back and forth round, then done, we're going to use the average, we're going to go forward. This allows you to get done with this exercise in a realistic period of time, because otherwise you're fighting over every little detail. Now, the 3-point technique says, well, it's not really quite right to say that